Well, welcome everybody. Obviously, those of you tuning in will still be reacting to the big news last night. It was that Joyce came out victorious in the clash for the European, Commonwealth and British heavyweight titles against Daniel Dubois. Obviously, a surprise end to the fight with Daniel Dubois taking a knee and choosing not to make the count in the 10th round. And of course, Carl, you were working for BT on the night, and your instinctive reaction was that he had quit. We spoke after the fight on the phone because obviously when you make a call like that, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to agree with you. There's going to be a lot of people that disagree with you. Talk me through the finish as you saw it and your reflections, having had a bit of time to sort of everything that happened.
Well, look, when I've been lucky enough to do a few punditry gigs recently, and one thing that normally people say after I do punditry work is that I'm pretty honest in my assessments. And honestly, at that point in time, last night, in that moment, it was a strange ending, and it looked like a quit from me, from Dubois. Now, at that point, I knew that his eye was a mess. It was closed shut. I didn't know how serious the damage was, but the factual matter is, if you take a knee and the referee's counting you and you decide not to get up, factually, that statement that I said that he quit is correct. Now, I understand that I'm getting a bit of flack for saying that, and I understand why some people are giving me a bit of flack, but that was me in the moment last night. That's what I thought. I suppose the sound bites that are picked up are quit and the word quit that I used, but I was complimentary to Dubois throughout, even after as well. I said he's young enough to come again. If this had been Joyce, who was in the situation, who took a knee and didn't get up at 35, I would have probably said he has to pack it in now. He's nowhere to go. But Dubois is young enough that he can learn from this. And that's kind of where I stand on it. I don't want to be seen as a guy I don't want to bash Daniel Dubois. I haven't met the kid, but I quite like him. I don't want to be seen as this guy who's bashing fighters, but that was my assessment last night in the moment. That's how I saw it, and again, I like to be as honest, brutally honest as I can.
Yeah, because when we spoke at, I don't know what time it was, about 1 a.m. or something, we said, well, we have to wait and see what the damage is, because we don't think a guy like Daniel would turn away and make that decision unless he was in a significant amount of pain. And obviously, we know now that he's got nerve damage in his eye and a fractured orbital bone. Sarah Shepherd from The Athletic broke that story about 2 hours ago. So we know he was in a significant amount of pain, and there must have been some serious discomfort there. The word quit is I think almost too reductive though to describe what happened, and I think it attaches like just very negative connotations to fighters.
Yeah.
Because you know yourself, you've been in difficult fights, Josh Warrington, where you went through a lot in those early rounds, but you dug in and you got through it. And I know you were standing next to a man in the punditry studio, David Hay, that fought on against Tony Bellew with a snapped Achilles tendon. So it's very easy for us to cast aspersions on fighters and just say, well, he could have made the count. But I guess my feeling on it was, I know what you're saying is correct, and I agree with you. Technically speaking, if you look at, let's take someone like Amir Khan against Breeders Prescott, he physically could not get up no matter what he tried. Whereas, could Daniel have physically stood up and held his gloves up? If we're going to get into the detail, yes. But really, at that point, if he was in as much pain as we now know he probably was, what was the best that was going to happen for him at that point? He would have probably had to tuck his chin down, put his hands up, cover up on the ropes. Joe would have let his hands go, and the referee would have come in and waved it off. And so actually the result and the final outcome wouldn't have changed. If there was maybe 45 seconds to go in round number 12, could you have argued that he should have done something to dig in? Yes, but in round 10 with 2 rounds to go, if he's in that much pain, you have to almost trust that as a fighting guy, and with a guy with will and spirit and heart that built himself up to this moment, that he wouldn't have taken a way out unless he really felt there was no other option. Is that fair?
Look, yeah, of course it is. Look, it's his own judgment call. I think people that are saying things like, you know, he's taking the knee and he's thinking about living the fight another day. He's worried about his vision. I
You know,
don't think you're thinking about that in that moment. You're thinking, the only thought that's in your head in that moment is, do I want to continue or do I not want to continue? And he didn't want to continue. I think that if he had have stood back up, and the referee brings him to the doctor and he stops it, there's no criticism thrown at him at all. If he could stood back up and the referee allows him to continue, Joe comes in with a barrage of punches and he gets stopped. There's no criticism. But it was just a strange ending. And this is a game, and you know, this is a brutal sport, boxing at times, and it's a sport where we've been taught, even as kids, to like fight through adversity and not to turn away. And look, he had a bloody broken orbital bone. It was a serious injury. I've never been in that situation, but I still, I don't know. You don't want to see someone go out like that. You know what I mean? And I think that because of Dubois is a nice guy and people seem to like him, I think if it was a different fighter, O'Hara Davies, for example, when he quit, is what everyone says, against Josh Taylor.
Yeah.
It's because he's someone who most people don't like O'Hara Davies. It's fine to say that, but Dubois is a nice guy, so we can't really get away with saying it. And I know it was a different situation. Dubois had a serious injury, but it was just a strange finish for me. But he again, like I said, I picked him to win the fight. I had him one point up at the time of the stoppage. And look, it just is what it is. This is how I saw it last night. What I saw was Dubois quit. That's what I thought. Like you talked about David Hay there. I've seen people giving Hay stick about the toe against Klitschko, but that was an excuse after the fight. He didn't quit. The guy, like you said, he fought with a snapped Achilles tendon. Like he fought with a number.
Yeah, he got knocked through the ropes on one leg, basically.
Yeah, this is you know, you have to give him respect for that. When I fought Josh Warrington after them disastrous first 3 rounds, I never really felt like I could come back and win the fight. But my thought process the whole way, I was getting hurt throughout the fight, and my thought process the whole way through that fight was, just keep fighting here, do not get stopped. And that was my thought process. I didn't want to get stopped. And it's, I don't know, it's going to be a blotch, I think, on Dubois. Not a blotch on his career, but it's going to be something that haunts him for a little while. And look, I again, like I said, I don't want to be seen to be the guy that's bashing Daniel Dubois. That's not what I'm doing. I think he's got every chance to come back and potentially become a world champion. But the ending for me was strange.
I think it raises bigger questions about the pattern of the fight, because ultimately the eye was the way it was because he ate over 100 jabs clean in 10 rounds, and he didn't really ever make any major adjustments to his pattern of fighting, to adjust to trying to see the jab coming, to catch it, to slip it. He walked onto the same shot again and again and again in the same place. I mean, normally when you're getting hit by a jab, you're getting hit by, if you're both orthodox, you're getting hit on the right eye. But of course, this was his left eye because Joe was jabbing and stepping to his right. And Joe seemed to be comfortable doing that all night. He weathered a few little mini storms early, but he managed those very well, clinched and held really well, bought his time when he needed to, discipline with his movement. And really, although, as you say, Daniel was probably up, and we'll talk about the scorecards in a second because that's a different conversation. But although in our view, I think I'm with you on that, he was probably 1 round behind at the time of the stoppage. Momentum was with Joe, and he's a fresher fighter. And if you had to put money on one guy going into those championships,
put it on Joe.
100%.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that what was really telling was in the first round, Dubois ate the jab from Joyce, and visibly you could see the reaction on his face, and it hurt him, and he didn't like it.
Yeah.
And it was almost like the first time someone's been there throwing back at him. and he just didn't like that reaction. I think something that we can give him credit for was, so he's got this eye injury, broken orbital bone. The eye was swelling from about round 2 or 3. So is that when it broke, or did it break after that? If he's been fighting with a broken orbital bone for another 7 rounds, then you have to give him credit for that as well. But I did say what I said last night, and although it was harsh, it's a factual comment.
Yeah, and look, we spoke to Frank Bruno 3-4 days ago about the Bone Crusher Smith fight, and it seems quite kind of prophetic now, having had that conversation with him, because he had his momentum derailed late in a fight that he was ahead in, and he'd been in a knockout win streak at that point, up to that point, and then had everything taken away from him by a guy who, just like Joe, could absorb the shots, could fire back, could outlast him in those championship rounds when things got tough, and ultimately he had to go back and regroup and rebuild. There were a lot of people on the inside, and again, I don't want to talk too much about conversations that go on outside of the public sphere of boxing, but I can remember when he turned over at 18, 19, and a few people thought that it was very early. I know his dad was very keen for him to turn over and not do another Olympic cycle, because obviously Fraser Clark was on the squad, and I think he was earmarked as the next guy to go to Tokyo. And so they felt they didn't want to wait another 4 years. But last night was proof of how key that amateur experience is, and the volume of rounds that Joe Joyce has done with top level opposition, and the training and everything else that he's built up over those years. That really proved to be the difference in that fight last night.
Yeah, absolutely. And people talk about the Bruno fight that you just talked about was the making of Frank. The Carl Thompson fight for David Haye was the making of David Haye. And I know this ended differently, this fight, but it could be the making of Daniel Dubois. And he's still very, very young. He did turn pro very young, limited amateur experience. And he's still only a baby in this heavyweight division. You see, heavyweights are still competing well into their 40s at a very high level. So he's plenty of time, loads and loads of time. And I have a feeling that he'll come back at some point and potentially become a world champion. Hopefully this is the making of him, because I do like the big man. But it was a strange one. I keep saying that. I don't want to be a broken record, but I was harsh in my assessment, but I was honest. And as a pundit, I don't think there's too many honest pundits around these days. If I'm being honest, a lot of people play the safe card, but I was being honest. And I stick to my guns there.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because as a pundit, you can choose to sit on the fence and cover yourself either way, so that you're on the right side of history the next day. But what you've done is you've nailed your colours to the mast, and that's going to bring out a whole contingent of people that agree with you, and a whole contingent of people that don't.
Well, I done it in the prediction of the fight. Even people are saying Dubois early or Joyce late. That was kind of what everybody was saying. But that's, you're hedging your bets and you're sitting in the fence there. It's one or the other, Dubois early or Joyce late. It turned out to be Joyce late. But I kind of nailed my colours to the fence and said that I made a prediction. I picked Daniel Dubois to win the fight by KO about 5 or 6. So I stuck my neck on the line and made that prediction, where other people were kind of sitting on the fence. And that's what I try to do all the time. I try to be honest in this game, and I get praise for that. But obviously I also get some criticism as well when people don't agree with what you have to say. But that's okay. People can disagree with each other. I have no hard feelings towards Daniel Dubois. I hope he doesn't have any hard feelings towards me. I hope that he sees it and he understands that I'm being honest, and that's it. And I wish the kid every success. But here, again, we're talking a lot about Dubois and how it finished. We have to talk about Joe Joyce and how he weathered the storm. He took some shots. He won the fight, a huge fight. He's now British, Commonwealth and European champion. And he's very, very close to fighting for a world title. So we have to give Joe all the credit in the world.
Yeah, and I think just seen Tony Yoka tweeted him this morning to say, look, I'll happily have that rematch with you. I mean, based on Yoka's performance against Christian Hammer on Friday night, I'm not convinced that he would have a great deal of success, especially over the 12 rounds. It suits Joe the further that fight goes. Obviously, lots of people would be happy to see the Usyk rematch. For those people that were there at your call or watched it, I think it was 2015 they fought in the WSB and Usyk won on points. Some good fights out there for him, and you would say really one of those, either of those, could act as a sort of final eliminator for a world title shot. And fair play to the guy, you know.
Yeah, of course. Look, we don't know what's going to happen. I think Usyk's mandatory for AJ, isn't he?
Yeah.
So is AJ going to try and hold on to the belts and fight Usyk and have to fight all his mandatories, or is he going to have to maybe potentially vacate one? So we don't know the lay of the landscape just yet, but he's there or thereabouts, Big Joe. And I think that, you know, people say from the performance last night, he's nowhere near these guys. And you look at his fight against Usyk in the WSB, which is a professional format, over 5 rounds. He lost the fight, but he pushed him hard, and it was a close fight. Over 12 rounds, Joe says would have a big impact on that fight, and he could win that fight against Usyk. Certainly could win that fight. And
the fact is, Usyk, for anyone that's watched him for the last 10 years, he is not as quick as he used to be. That's the fact. He's still very good. He's still got lots of what made him a very good amateur, but he has slowed a little bit. Obviously, he's put on an extra kind of stone and a half. That has to play a factor, especially when you're carrying that late into a 12-round fight against a guy that weighs 260 pounds. So,
and you have to adapt. You have to slow down. You can't fight at the amateur pace like he does as a pro for 12 rounds. It's just impossible to do. Well, you say that, but Joe Joyce can. He's done that. He's fought at the same pace his whole amateur and professional career. He's got one gear, and it's a very high one, and he stays in it. And him and Usyk, it's a tough one to call, I think.
Yeah, it's a good fight. Let's just talk about the judges' scorecard. So one judge had Dubois winning by 5 rounds. That was John Latham. I mean, look, you and I said the same thing last night. We had Dubois 1 up going into that 10th round. Let's assume that Dubois survives and sees out the end of that 10th round. Joe gets a 10-8 round. I think we would probably both agree that Joe would be 1 up going into round 11. I wouldn't really be willing to listen to many opinions on that either way. I think it was pretty clear the rounds that they both won. And I feel like if they weren't level, Dubois was 1 up at the time of the stoppage. There really wasn't much else to be decided. How on earth John Latham has got Dubois winning by 5 rounds on his card?
It has to be questioned. I really do. I think like what you said was fair, that the rounds, they weren't that hard to score. So there was one round, there was round 4, I think, was a hard one to score, but every other round was okay. I thought that round 4 actually scored it to Joyce, but just about give it to Joyce. I don't like to give even rounds, but I think that when you're fighting so hard with actually who won the fight, then that's probably or who won that round. That's probably a time to give an even round. But I ended up just edging it to Joe. That was the only round for me that was difficult to score. So to have Dubois 5 rounds up was insane.
Yeah, and so for Joe, really, a knockout was the only way he could have won that fight, and obviously we know that now. Fans are really funny about 10-10 rounds, but actually, my thought has always been, as long as a scorecard isn't littered with them, if there's 1 round or even 2 in a very close fight where you can't separate the 2 guys, why punish one guy just because you can't make your mind up?
Yeah, fair point. That is a very, very fair point. And I think in the situation, I kind of fought with myself as to which way it was going. I didn't ever feel like I was going to give that round to Dubois. I thought either level or Joe. But when you're fighting that much and you're that unsure, I suppose then it's probably right that you scored a 10-10.
Yeah, agreed. All right, mate. Well, good to catch up. Safe journey back to Manchester. You're just back in camp next week, are you?
Yeah, I'm still in London now. I'm about to catch a train and back to hit the ground running.
Well, for what it's worth, I thought you were very good on the punditry. So,
thanks very much. Look, I get a fair bit of complimentary praise thrown at me when I do the punditry stuff, but obviously when you are honest and when you make these assessments of people, you leave yourself open to criticism, and that's the game. Again, hope there's no hard feelings towards me and Big Daniel. I hope he goes on.
Yeah,
you're smiling because he could squash my head if he wanted to. Like
you can fly. It's been really pissing you all weekend. Yeah. You finally get it. Yeah.
That's all he has to do. He could bust my head like a watermelon. But I just said it how I saw it, and that's me being honest.
Fair enough, mate.
If I upset anybody there, I apologize for that, but I don't apologize for my statement.
We should be able to have different opinions on boxing without falling out, and that goes for
absolutely. That goes for everything in life, mate. And you know, obviously, you're not going to agree with everybody's opinion on everything, but people have opinions, and you should be able to understand that. You don't have to agree with it necessarily. You don't have to agree with my opinion. Some people do, some people don't. It's what it is, and that's it.
Nice one. All right, mate. Catch up with you soon.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, pal. See ya.